What's up, everybody? Welcome back to your favorite New York Jets subscription podcast, Badlands. I'm your host, Joe Caporoso, joined as always by Connor Rogers. We are officially into the summer. Football season's not that far away, but it's still kind of far away. We're going to hit on a few different topics, some very, I'll call them Twittery topics that were being batted around throughout the weekend. Then we're going to go jump and record a war room as we got a bunch of great questions in our Discord. CR, how you doing? How you feeling?
Good, man. It's a great time of year. Coming off a holiday weekend, it was a lot of fun. I know Jets OTAs have officially been underway because the Jets have a new coaching staff. So there's been a little, I don't want to call it news, but you get a little bit of Jets buzz on the timeline and everything that comes with that. But this is truly our slowest time of the year, and sometimes I'd say one of our best times of the year.
So I got three different prompts for you. Well, just a little PTI for us, like we're doing an ESPN desk show in some way. First one, as it sits right now, we're recording this May 27th. Someone comes up to you and says, Connor, AFC East standings, not just the Jets. How do you see the AFC East standings shaking out right now? Now, I, being the narcissist that I am, answered my own question on Twitter for this over the weekend, but I'm curious for your POV, and then we can bat it around. So I put Bills at 12-5.
Right.
Pats at 10-7, Pats at 9-8. Which pained me a little bit to do, but I put him at 9-8. And then I put both the Jets and the Dolphins at 7-10 and put the Jets in third because they'll have the tiebreaker. So effectively 12-5, 9-8, 7-10, 7-10 for our four AFC East teams. What's your reaction to that? And what would your spit take be for how you would see these records in order coming together as of late May, with the caveat that we could still change our mind and probably will change our mind before week one?
We're not that wildly different. I would have the Bills as a 13-win team. I think this is the year where the gap from them, and I know it's weird to say because the Dolphins were 8-9 last year, the Jets and Patriots, only the Jets won 5 games, Patriots won 4. I think the gap is just as big, and you could argue that that gap between the Bills and the Dolphins existed as big as it did because they had a Tua injury, and the Dolphins were not prepared for a Tua injury, which is insane, but the Dolphins went out, and their solution to a Tua injury this year is Zach Wilson. So they
can't make it up.
You really can't make it up. And the Dolphins, it's odd because they have talent throughout the team. They just and Mike McDaniel is a very good offensive coach, but that can only get you so far. So I think the Bills are a 13-win team again. They were 13-4 last year. I think they are better equipped this year as a whole. And they have a program in place that is, brings sustainability. And in the AFC last year, they were 9-3. And what's, in the division, I actually forget their division record, but they were 5-1. Yep. So I kind of see a repeat of most of those things. I think the Bills should win 5 of their 6 division games. You probably have an ability to have a stinker, whether that's against one of Miami, New York, or New England. I think where we differ the most is, and this is where I differ the most in terms of against consensus, I think the New England expectations have gotten out of control. And you could say that they probably maxed out in terms of how well they could do at head coach by getting Vrabel. They had a very strong draft, but I do think the difference of them picking at 4 instead of 2 or 3 we'll look back and call that monumental 3 years from now. And I think while all those things are important, and free agency does analytically, when you spend that much, it gives you a short-term shot in the arm. Like, you should buy a couple more wins this year because of it. It doesn't do anything for your long-term success, but you should be able to buy a couple more wins because of it. I think their win projections are just baking in. And this is funny coming from me because I love Drake May as a prospect, but I think it's unreasonable expectations. And maybe that's because they have Josh McDaniels, which a lot of people are high on. I'm kind of just in the middle on Josh McDaniels at this point. I don't love their offensive line still, especially if Morgan Moses continues his trend of unfortunately being hurt every year. And I don't know if they got the playmaker they need to funnel the offense through unless Stephon Diggs kind of beats history and is ready for that, to be himself again at his age, coming off an ACL right out of the gate. All that to say, I think New England is much better. I think New England is a 8-win team. Okay. And I think that's a big gap. And then it feels like the Jets and Dolphins are a 7-win team. It's a weird division where it's New England. It's
bundled together.
It's Buffalo, and then everybody's kind of the same. in my opinion. How they play is wildly different. Like New England is trying to build something with Drake May, while the Dolphins are kind of just treading water nowhere. And the Jets are in between them both, where the Jets are building something totally different, which Miami isn't. But the Jets haven't sunk an asset into a quarterback that they're building it all around right now. So the Jets are kind of crawling forward. New England is trying to leap forward, and the Dolphins are just not moving at all. And I think at the end of the day, while all of them are different, they'll have kind of similar results, in my opinion. So, yeah, I think this is a one-team division in terms of who actually matters in the AFC playoff picture.
I think that's fair until we see it proven otherwise. Buffalo deserves the benefit of the doubt, as they've just done it so many years in a row now. I think, like we kind of say every year, it's going to come down to how the Jets, Patriots, and Dolphins play against each other. Can the Jets go 3-1 in those games, or are they going 0-4 or 1-3?
Right, and that's what New England's thinking.
And that's going to be the swing. New England is looking at the Jets and going, "That's 2 wins."
Right,
and if it's
which
not
is foolish.
And if it's not 2 wins, then you know what? They're probably not 9-8. They're 8-9 or 7-10.
Right.
And with the Dolphins, I think so much of it's going to come down to: are you getting 17-2 in games, and how many Zach Wilson games are you getting? Right. This isn't like, I don't know, like Jacoby Brissett's coming in, you could hold the fort and go 2-1. If Zach Wilson comes in, I think the train goes off the track pretty quickly there. Never mind with the Tyreek situation and some other parts of the roster.
Right.
So I just feel like their margin for error might be that much more thin. But how do you play against each other? And can Aaron Glenn, like we said before, can the Jets coaching staff go toe-to-toe with Miami? And I'm not saying Miami's is one of the best in the league, but they've coached circles around the Jets in recent years. And can the Jets steal one there? And if they hold up in those games, that's where the swing's going to be. New England, I can't act like I don't think Vrabel is going to be a good coach. We wanted Vrabel, so they got him. And if May's good, then that's their path to being scrappy and being in the mix for a playoff team. But the rest of the roster has plenty of questions. And your hope as a Jet fan is that New England thinking those are 2 give-me's proves to be naive. And the Jets are able to take one from them and take one from Miami. And then maybe there will be a team that does just enough, because the other 2 teams are so average, to compete for that 6th or 7th most likely spot in the AFC. But I do agree that Buffalo probably wraps up this division by like week 14 or week 15. And that's not overly different from recent years. Until I see them take that big step back for all the periodic flaws that they have and all the questions that eventually it will happen. But until it happens, I just think saying it won't doesn't quite make sense. But I think it's a mud pile for that 2nd spot, which isn't a bad thing for the Jets.
No, you actually want variance if you're the Jets, and you got it in front of you. And what I mean by variance is that the variance with New England is that we just don't know if Drake May is ready to shoulder the load in year 2. Drake May could not live up to expectations this year, and you could still think he's going to be a good quarterback in this league. It's year 2, coming off a year where he wasn't playing in a lot of meaningful spots. Yeah. And he made mistakes like all young quarterbacks do. And they don't have a proven offensive line yet. Like, just because they took a tackle 4th overall doesn't mean he's going to be great as a rookie. And there's bigger questions around that pick. The Dolphins, we used to study this at NBC on Fantasy Football Happy Hour. When Teron Armstead was out, he would have the biggest effect on a spread for a non-quarterback that we noticed for a couple year period, because he was hurt a lot.
Yeah.
But also when he played, the Dolphins were an entirely different team, and now he retired. So they're going to be kind of settling Patrick Paul into left tackle. We don't know if Patrick Paul is going to be any good. And when the Dolphins offensive line is bad, and without Teron Armstead, their offense kind of sinks. And that's not even factoring in the odds of a Tua injury, or that their secondary will most likely be without Jalen Ramsey, and their starting safeties are Ifeatu Melifonwu and Ashton Davis. Like, literally, that's their starting safeties. So, and we could play this game with the Jets. Sure. They have their holes, but that's why the Jets have a 6.5 win total, right? Like, that's why. And then, so variance is what you want, because variance typically at the end of the day is solved by coaching, and the Jets have variance at coaching. We have no idea if Aaron Glenn is going to be a good head coach. We know that Mike McDaniel is a good offensive coach with significant limitations. We know for as good of a coach or program guy Mike Vrabel is, he had significant offensive limitations at the end of his tenure in Tennessee and some personnel issues. So we're going to see how he does in that area in his second stop. So yeah, variance is good. It leads to excitement, and it gives the Jets an opportunity, to kind of build towards something.
I will say before we pivot to segment 2 that it does kind of feel like this Miami iteration is ran its course and hit its ceiling. Like it's hard to see this iteration going any further than they've gone already with the 2 playoff appearances that ultimately weren't pretty, but they got there. And I just don't know why this year is any different for them than the past few years. And one of these years, eventually, do you kind of just slam into a wall and win 7 instead of 9? And even last year, they started to take that step back because they were eliminated by the end of the first quarter of that Jets game the last week of the season, and then just laid down and died.
Yeah, they have a culture. It seems like from afar a culture issue.
Yeah, at a certain point, you wonder, are guys going to start tuning it out? Because it's like, all right, like we're first round fodder, or we don't even get in, and like, is it time for a bigger change? And again, I don't think McDaniel's a bad coach per se. I just wonder, sometimes these things run their course, and we'll see if that's the year. This is the year that happens. Now, second one, we'll start with a more positive iteration of this. As it stands right now, who's the most underrated player on the Jets roster? By fans, by general consensus, who's overlooked consistently when someone's like talking to you about the Jets and they're like never brought up, but from someone who's close enough to the team, you're like, this guy's like pretty damn good. And why is nobody talking about him? Or people are not thinking about the impact he's going to have enough on the 25 team. So where does your head go to on who that person is?
These are always the hardest questions for me to answer because, especially for you and I, we are just so in the weeds. It's wild how much headspace the Jets occupy, not even year round, but like from August to the end of the draft, the Jets take up a lot of our time where you never truly feel like there's a player that you aren't talking about. I think my honest answer is, but I'm not going to expand length for an extended period of time. There we go. We got there on this because it's kind of useless, is Tyrod Taylor. I think if you told me Tyrod Taylor was going to play 17 games this year, the Jets easily eclipse their win total. Easily.
Yep.
But Fields gives you more variance going back to that because he is legitimately a dynamic rushing threat that has the ability to improve as a passer. We just need to see it. And people kind of treat Tyrod like nobody cares. It's,
old head in the room. He's been there. He's seen everything. He feels older than he is. Is he like 34? And I kind of feel like everyone thinks he's like 44, but
yeah, Tyrod is turning 36 in August. Whew, so that's my real answer, but it's kind of a useless answer because that's not really the direction this team is going in. And unless somebody got hurt, it just wouldn't really matter. I think my more topical answer, ironically, is Joe Tippmann.
Yeah.
I don't
leave our guy alone. Let him start at center. He was great last year, or very good.
I don't know how this is even a conversation. Like Josh Myers has not been
Jag 101, just like a quintessential Jag.
I would love if he's a Jag. He's been a step below that. He's like at the price they got him. He is capable depth, which is what you always want on the offensive line in the league, that the demand for it is through the roof. But Joe Tippmann, going into year 3, because of his athletic profile, like there's things you could do in the run game with him that in terms of getting him out of the gate and pulling and moving and climbing, that can really make a difference with this team. When the run game adds the extra threat of Fields' legs and the Jets running a little bit more under center, and the zone read that was on the film breakdown, like that's going to matter a lot in this offense where I don't know how we got here, but Joe Tippmann is just like, we had no Joe Tippmann conversations during the season last year.
Kind of how you want it for a center in some ways. It's just like he's out there kicking ass and doing his job every week. And
it felt like by week 11, you were like, oh, like Joe Tippmann's going to start at center for a long time for this team. That's a good feeling.
Yeah.
But there was so many loud problems with the Jets last year that we kind of had all of those quiet storylines go under the radar. Like John Simpson was a really good signing. Joe Tippmann looks like a good draft pick. Douglas finally hit on a few after a lot of big offensive line misses. ABT was healthy. So, but there was just so many loud issues with the Jets that nobody really spent the time talking about those. So I'll say Tippmann just because the fact that the guy is in conversation for being in a having to compete for his job against a player that isn't very good just goes to show you that people didn't pay attention to what he did at all last year. And what he does increases the ceiling of your offense. And you should always be looking for that on the offensive line.
Yeah, I hope this is a little bit more of like, hey, we know this veteran. We like Tippmann. We think he could be that much better. A little fire under the ass and see if he has that much better of a summer. But he's going to be our guy when push comes to shove. But we don't want to hand anything out to one of our younger offensive linemen. I can't say youngest because they have Olu and Membu, and we'll see.
Yeah.
I do think Tippmann will start week 1. I hope he starts week 1 unless something like crazy happens. Myers totally fine as a backup. New Wes Schweitzer, who hopefully can be healthy. I know he has some history with Fields, but it doesn't really matter. Just play the best guy at center, and I hope it gets there. Now, I'm surprised you didn't say this guy, and that's probably because Badlands is maybe 10% higher on him than most people are, especially you and Dan. I'm going to say Will McDonald, who had
it's a good
10 plus sacks last year, which is not common for the Jets. And I know we don't want to just clear the low bar of the Jets, but not easy to get 10 sacks. Not everyone does it. Putting on 15 pounds should be that much more of a chess piece and moved around in Aaron Glenn's defense. I don't see any reason to think he can't do that again. And, again, it was a surprising pick. Jets drafted a first-round edge, and within his first 2 years, he had 10 sacks. And he is was a younger prospect. He could still grow into his body. He has another, set of attacking defensive coaches who are coming in. I just think it was a quiet 10-plus sack season, and the Jets were also not great last year. But could he go out and have 11, 12 sacks again? And you're like, wow, this guy racked up almost 30 sacks through his first 3 seasons. That's pretty damn good, and let's not take that for granted. Now, I hope Jermaine is there in the back half of the year to take some of the heat off. And Will McDonald did it without Jermaine Johnson last year. Wasn't the best Quinnen Williams season ever. So hopefully those 2 variables change to the positive. And he was kind of surrounded by Kinlaw and Clemens. And I know we haven't cured all these issues in the defensive line. I just think he could only get better. And his name, like, why do you feel good about the Jets? What do you like? You like Garrett, you like Sauce, you like Quinnen. Now, Sherwood's name will get mentioned because he got the big contract. You like Olu, you like Membu, Brees. Usually McDonald isn't thrown in, but it's a first-round pick who had 10-plus sacks. So he was a popular answer. Michael Carter is always a popular answer because he doesn't play like a flashy role. He's just like a very smart slot corner, which isn't the flashiest, sexiest thing, but there's nothing wrong with that answer as well. I'm just excited to see McDonald in this defense. I do worry sometimes when we hear about defensive linemen putting a lot of weight on. It's like by Lorenzo Malden theory, who was like pretty good as a rookie and then put on like 27 pounds and was terrible and that went on to an illustrious CFL career. But I feel like with McDonald, with his build, this is actually going to be a good thing. And I think he's going to be that much more of a well-rounded player without, like, he had 15 pounds to gain without hurting his explosiveness overall. So I'm not panicked about that weight addition, which I know both you and Dan were happy to see.
Yeah, I mean, McDonald, that I guess I don't think of him because I went through the process of, and so did Dan, liking him as a prospect. I had him in my top 30 players. I was surprised when he went 15th, but there was the shock factor. It was one of those picks where I was like, everyone calm down. Like, he's going to be fine at what he does well. And he's been fine at what he does. He was to do that as, in your second year, but that's the difference when you had a guy that was, 3-time first team all Big 12 and, kept getting better every year and was dominating in his conference as a true pass rush artist. So yeah, he's underappreciated. I bet the reason is because the Jets were not winning a lot of games last year that gave McDonald the chance to close games. Yeah. Pass rushers kind of get their reputation typically from closing games, and the Jets stunk last year, which probably gives you actually a little bit more of a glass half full look that he had a double-digit sack season, and it felt like the Jets were constantly playing.
We're always losing.
Bad scripts, right? Yeah. As a pass rusher, you want to be playing in positive scripts where you could pin your ears back and go. So I really liked seeing the coaching staff give him some love because I thought schematically there was going to be an adjustment for him, but it feels like logic prevailed and they have high expectations, as we all should, for Will McDonald in year 3.
All right, last but not least, we'll save it for the end so it doesn't make it to the YouTube segment. If you want the full episode, patreon.com/Badlands TOJ. Who is, other side of the coin, the most overrated player currently on the Jets roster.